My husband laughed. When I found the panties, my sister went pale. When the money appeared, I stood in our bedroom, holding the delicate lace between trembling fingers, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Black, size small, expensive-looking with a French label I'd never heard of. Nothing like the practical cotton briefs I bought in multi-packs from Target. "Marcus?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. My husband looked up from his phone, sprawled across our king-sized bed in his usual post-work position, shoes kicked off, tie loosened, completely relaxed. When he saw what I was holding, something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. Then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an apologetic laugh. A full, genuine laugh that made his shoulders shake. "Babe, seriously." He sat up, grinning like I'd just told him the punchline to a joke. "You found those in the laundry, didn't you?" I nodded, unable to speak. "They're from the gym bag mix-up last week. Remember? I told you some woman grabbed my bag by mistake, and when she returned it, everything was jumbled up." He stood and walked over, taking the panties from my hand and tossing them casually into the trash can. I can't believe I didn't notice them when I unpacked. How embarrassing. The explanation was smooth, too smooth, but delivered with such casual confidence that I felt my suspicions begin to waver. "A gym bag mix-up," I repeated. "Yeah, I mentioned it to you, didn't I? Last Thursday?" He put his hands on my shoulders, his green eyes earnest and amused. "Emma, come on. You don't actually think I'd be stupid enough to bring another woman's underwear home in my laundry, do you?" When he put it that way, it did sound ridiculous. I guess you mentioned something about a bag," I said, though I couldn't quite remember the conversation. "Exactly." He kissed my forehead. "I love you, you crazy woman. But maybe lay off the true crime podcasts before bed, yeah? They're making you paranoid." I tried to laugh along with him, but the sound came out hollow. Part 2. The pattern. That should have been the end of it. A reasonable explanation for an uncomfortable discovery. But something kept nagging at me, like a loose thread I couldn't stop pulling. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I'd previously overlooked. Small things. Insignificant things. Marcus's phone, which used to sit casually on the counter, now stayed in his pocket. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it quickly and sometimes leave the room to respond. He'd always been protective of his phone. Something about work confidentiality, but this felt different. His schedule had changed too. More late nights at the office, more weekend networking events. When I suggested coming along to one, he'd looked almost panicked before recovering with a smooth excuse about how boring it would be for me. And then there was the way he'd started treating me in front of our friends. Nothing overtly cruel, but a subtle shift in tone. When I voiced an opinion, he'd smile indulgently and say something like, "Emma has such creative interpretations of things," or "my wife and her theories," always with a laugh that invited everyone else to join in. It made me feel small, foolish, like the neurotic wife from a sitcom. I started second-guessing everything I said in public, editing myself, staying quiet rather than risk another one of those indulgent laughs. "You're being too sensitive," my best friend Rachel said when I tried to explain it over coffee. "Marcus adores you. Everyone can see it." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Part 3. Following the money. The real breakthrough came by accident. I was reconciling our joint checking account, something I did every month like clockwork, a habit from my days working in accounting, when I noticed a discrepancy. A cash withdrawal of $500 that I didn't remember making. I pulled up our statements for the past 6 months, and there it was. A pattern of cash withdrawals, always on Thursdays, always between $400 and $600, sometimes twice a month, sometimes 3 times. In total, over the past 6 months, nearly $15,000 had been withdrawn in cash. My hands shook as I made the calculations. We both had access to the account, but I knew every penny I spent. These withdrawals weren't mine. When Marcus came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the bank statements spread in front of me. "We need to talk about these," I said, keeping my voice steady. He glanced at the papers and shrugged. "What about them?" "These cash withdrawals. $15,000 over 6 months. Where is that money going?" For a split second, just a split second, I saw something cross his face. Then the easy smile returned. Client gifts, mostly. You know how it is in my business. You take a client to lunch. You slip the maitre d' something to get a good table. You send a thank you gift after closing a deal. That kind of thing. $15,000 worth of thank you gifts? Emma. His tone shifted, taking on that edge I'd come to dread. I don't question you about every purchase you make. I trust you. Why are you suddenly going through our accounts like some kind of auditor? Because I am an auditor. Was an auditor. I corrected myself. I'd given up my career 2 years ago when we'd started trying for a baby that hadn't come yet, adding another layer of stress to our marriage. Right, was. He emphasized the past tense in a way that stung. Look, if you're worried about money, we can talk about it. But this interrogation over some cash withdrawals? It's a bit much, don't you think? Once again, he made me feel foolish for asking questions. But this time, I didn't back down completely. I'd like to see the receipts, I said quietly. For the client gifts. His jaw tightened. I don't keep receipts for cash transactions, Emma. That's kind of the point of cash. Then maybe you should start. For tax purposes. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Fine. I'll be more careful about tracking expenses. Happy? I wasn't happy. Not even close. But I nodded, and he kissed the top of my head before heading upstairs to change. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the bank statements, and made a decision. If Marcus wasn't going to explain where that money was going, I'd find out myself. Part 4. The investigation. I started small, checking things I could access without arousing suspicion. His credit card statements. The one that came to our address, at least. I discovered he had a second card I didn't know about, one that went paperless. The statement I did have access to showed normal expenses at first glance. Business lunches, gas, the usual routine purchases. But when I looked closer, patterns emerged. Regular charges at the same restaurant every Thursday afternoon. Always for 2 people. Always expensive bottles of wine. The kind of intimate lunch that wasn't about closing business deals. I started a spreadsheet, documenting everything. Dates, amounts, locations, cross-referencing them with his calendar, with his excuses for working late, with the cash withdrawals from our joint account. His car's GPS history was more damning. Modern cars remember everything, and Marcus had never thought to clear his. I spent an entire afternoon while he was at work, sitting in the driver's seat of his BMW, scrolling through months of saved destinations. The apartment complex appeared over and over. 2847 Riverside Drive, Unit 412. Sometimes on Thursdays, aligning with the restaurant charges and cash withdrawals, but also on Tuesday evenings, weekend afternoons when he'd claimed to be playing golf. When I looked up the address, my stomach dropped. It was an upscale building with expensive units, the kind with a doorman and underground parking. Monthly rent would easily be $3,000 or $4,000, the kind of place you'd rent for someone you wanted to keep comfortable and discreet. I drove by it one afternoon, parking across the street and just staring at the gleaming glass facade. Somewhere in that building, my husband was keeping another life, another woman. I imagined her there, waiting for him, living in luxury paid for with money that should have been ours. The rage that washed over me was so intense I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. But rage wasn't enough. I needed evidence that would hold up, that couldn't be explained away with Marcus's smooth lies and easy charm. I considered hiring a private investigator, but the money would be noticeable. Our joint account was the only one I had access to, and any significant withdrawal would trigger questions. I thought about confronting him directly, demanding the truth, but I'd seen how he handled my questions about the panties. He'd make me feel crazy, paranoid, stupid. He'd gaslight me until I doubted my own evidence. No, I needed an ally, someone who would believe me, who would help me gather irrefutable proof. That's when I made what I thought was the obvious choice, but what turned out to be the worst decision of my life. I confided in my sister. Lily was 3 years younger than me, unmarried, and had always been the wild child of the family. Where I was responsible and careful, she was spontaneous and reckless. We'd never been close, not really, but she was family, and I was desperate for someone to talk to who wouldn't dismiss my concerns the way Marcus and Rachel had. We met for lunch at a trendy bistro downtown, Lily was already there when I arrived, looking stunning as always in a designer dress that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. She'd done well for herself in marketing, or so she claimed. "So, what's the emergency?" she asked, sipping her mimosa. "You sounded stressed on the phone." I took a deep breath and told her everything. The panties, the cash withdrawals, the strange apartment complex, Marcus's defensive behavior. As I spoke, I watched her face carefully, looking for a reaction. She listened with apparent concern, her eyes wide, her hand occasionally reaching out to squeeze mine. "Oh, Emma," she said when I finished. "That's awful. Have you thought about hiring a private investigator? I can't afford one." "Not without Marcus noticing the expense. What if I helped you?" Lily leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I could lend you the money. Or better yet, I have a friend who does that kind of work. Maybe I could call in a favor." Relief flooded through me. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. You're my sister." She smiled, warm and reassuring. "We'll figure out what's going on. And if Marcus is cheating, we'll make sure you're protected." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone. What I didn't notice was the slight tremor in Lily's hand as she lifted her mimosa to her lips, or the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Part 5. Sunday Dinner. 2 days later, Marcus suggested we host Sunday dinner. "Your family hasn't been over in a while," he said, scrolling through his phone without looking at me. "Your mom was asking about it." I was surprised. Marcus usually avoided my family gatherings when he could, claiming work stress or making plans with his own friends. But I agreed, grateful for anything that felt normal. Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that belonged in a magazine spread. I spent the morning cooking, my mother's pot roast recipe, rosemary potatoes, green beans almondine, and an apple pie for dessert. The kind of meal that took hours but made the house smell like home. My parents arrived first, my father carrying a bottle of wine, my mother immediately taking over in the kitchen despite my protests. Lily came last, 20 minutes late, looking effortlessly chic in skinny jeans and a cashmere sweater. Sorry, she said, kissing my cheek. "Client call ran late." We gathered in the dining room, passing dishes and falling into the comfortable rhythm of family dinner. My father told stories about his golf game. My mother updated us on the neighborhood drama. Lily talked about a new marketing campaign she was developing. And Marcus was charming, attentive. He laughed at my father's jokes, complimented my mother's contribution to the meal, asked Lily interested questions about her work. At one point, I caught them exchanging a look across the table. Just a brief glance, but something about it made my skin prickle. "So Emma tells me you've been working late a lot," my mother said to Marcus, serving herself more potatoes. "I hope they're compensating you properly for all those extra hours." Marcus smiled easily. "Oh, you know how it is in finance. When you're managing client portfolios, the market doesn't care about your dinner plans." "Still," my father chimed in, "you should make sure you're taking care of yourself. And your marriage. Work can wait. Family can't." "Absolutely right, sir." Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. "Emma's been very understanding. I'm lucky to have her." I forced a smile, but my mind was racing. He was good at this. The performance of being a devoted husband. Maybe that's all our entire marriage had been. A performance. "Actually," Lily said suddenly, "I wanted to talk to you both about something." Everyone turned to look at her. She took a breath, seeming nervous. "I've been thinking about getting my own place, somewhere bigger, and I might need some financial advice, Marcus, about mortgages and investments and all that. Would you be willing to help me out?" "Of course," Marcus said immediately. "Happy to help. We could meet for coffee sometime this week and go over your options." "That would be great." Lily's smile was bright, but I noticed her hand shake slightly as she reached for her water glass. The rest of the dinner passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something important. Some subtext running beneath the pleasant conversation. When everyone left, Marcus helped me clean up the kitchen, whistling softly to himself. "That was nice," he said. "We should do it more often." "Yeah," I said, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary. "We should." That night, lying in bed beside my sleeping husband, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. I was going to follow him. Not hire a private investigator through Lily's mysterious friend. Not wait for more evidence to pile up. I was going to see for myself where he went on those Thursday afternoons when cash got withdrawn from our account. Ow. Part 6. The Truth. Thursday arrived with overcast skies and a chill in the air that promised early winter. Marcus left for work at his usual time, kissing me goodbye at the door with the same distracted affection he'd shown for months. "Love you," he said automatically, already checking his phone. "Love you too," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I waited 30 minutes after he left, then got in my car and drove to his office building downtown. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. This was it. Whatever I discovered today would change everything. I parked across the street with a clear view of the entrance and waited, watching. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The minutes crawled by. I watched people enter and exit the building. Business suits, briefcases, everyone moving with purpose. A whole world of people going about their normal day while mine was potentially falling apart. I'd brought coffee and snacks, prepared to wait as long as necessary. My phone sat on the passenger seat, ready to take photos or video if needed. At 2:47 p.m., Marcus emerged from the building. I slid down in my seat slightly, watching him through the windshield. But he didn't head to his car in the underground parking garage. Instead, he walked 3 blocks down the street, his pace casual, unhurried. I waited until he was nearly out of sight, then got out of my car and followed on foot, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice me if he turned around. My heart hammered in my chest. I felt like I was in a spy movie, except this was my real life, my real marriage falling apart with every step. He stopped at a coffee shop with outdoor seating. Despite the cold, he chose a table outside, checking his phone and glancing around, waiting. I ducked into a bookstore across the street, positioning myself by the window where I could watch without being seen. 15 minutes later, someone joined him. Lily. My sister slid into the seat across from him with a familiarity that made my stomach lurch. She wasn't nervous or furtive. She leaned in close, smiled at something he said, touched his hand across the table. The gesture was so casual, so comfortable. This wasn't new for them. This was routine. I pulled out my phone and started recording, zooming in as much as I could. The video was shaky. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, but it captured everything. The way they sat too close. The way he looked at her with an expression I recognized because he used to look at me that way, years ago. The way she laughed at his jokes. They talked for 20 minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying from across the street, but I could read the body language. This wasn't a casual meeting between in-laws. This was intimate, familiar. Then Marcus pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. An envelope. Lily glanced around quickly, a movement so subtle I almost missed it, before palming it and slipping it into her purse. Money. He'd just given her money. The cash withdrawals. The secret account. It was all for her. For my sister. I thought I might vomit right there in the bookstore. The betrayal felt physical, like something breaking inside my chest. After another 10 minutes of conversation, they stood. Marcus checked his watch, said something that made Lily laugh, and they parted ways, him heading back toward his office, her walking in the opposite direction toward the parking garage. I stood frozen by the window, my phone still recording even though they were gone. Around me, people browsed books, normal people having normal days. I wanted to scream at them. Don't you see? Don't you understand? My entire life just imploded and you're all just buying books like nothing happened. But I didn't scream. I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths, to think clearly despite the chaos in my head. Marcus wasn't having an affair with some stranger. He was having an affair with my sister, my little sister, who I'd protected and defended our whole lives, who'd come to family dinners and hugged me and asked about my marriage, who'd listened to me worry about our inability to get pregnant and offered sympathy. How long? How long had this been going on? The questions multiplied in my mind, but I pushed them aside. Questions could wait. Right now, I needed more evidence. I drove home in a daze, operating on autopilot. Once inside, I locked the door and did something I probably should have done months ago. I went through Marcus's home office with methodical precision. His filing cabinet was locked, but I knew where he kept the key. In his desk drawer, taped to the underside. Inside the cabinet, I found folders organized by year and client name. And in the very back, behind the legitimate files, I found a folder labeled ML, Marcus and Lily, or maybe just miscellaneous luxury. Either way, my hands shook as I opened it. Inside were bank statements for an account I'd never seen, an account in Marcus's name alone, at a different bank. And the transactions told a clear story. Regular deposits matching the amounts withdrawn from our joint account, payments to the apartment complex I'd found in his GPS history, charges at expensive restaurants, jewelry purchases, spa treatments, everything you'd expect from a man keeping a mistress comfortable. But there was more. As I flipped through the statements, I noticed other transfers. Larger ones. $50,000, $75,000, $100,000. All going to an account with Lily's name on it. I sat back on my heels, the papers scattered around me, trying to understand what I was seeing. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic, like Marcus was funding Lily's entire life. But why? He didn't love her. I was certain of that now. If he'd loved her, he would have left me. This was something else, something I didn't understand yet. I took pictures of everything with my phone, then carefully returned the folder to its hiding place. When Marcus came home that evening, I was cooking dinner like nothing had happened. I smiled. I asked about his day. I played the role of the oblivious wife, because I'd learned something important from watching him. The person who reveals nothing has all the power, and I was done being powerless. Part 7. The plan. That night I barely slept. My mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, plans. By morning I knew what I needed to do. First, I needed help. Real help. Not from my sister, obviously, and not from Rachel, who would probably tell me I was overreacting even with photographic evidence. I needed a lawyer. Using a computer at the public library, I wasn't taking any chances that Marcus might track my search history. I researched divorce attorneys specializing in high-asset cases with infidelity. I made an appointment with one for the following week, using my maiden name. Second, I needed to secure my own finances. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, one Marcus had no connection to, and transferred half of our joint savings. It was my legal right as a co-owner of the account, but I knew he'd notice eventually. Third, I needed to gather more evidence, not just of the affair, but of the money trail. Something about those large transfers to Lily bothered me. They were too large, too regular. This wasn't just a man spoiling his mistress. This was something else. I waited until the following Thursday, when I knew Marcus would be meeting Lily again, based on the pattern I'd identified. This time, I didn't follow him. Instead, I went to the apartment complex his GPS showed he visited regularly. It was exactly as upscale as it had looked online. A doorman, a lobby with marble floors and fresh flowers. The kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions. I walked past the building twice, studying it. Then I noticed something, a coffee shop across the street with a perfect view of the entrance. I settled at a window table with a latte and my laptop, pretending to work while I watched. At 3:30 p.m., right on schedule, Lily arrived. She didn't look around nervously or try to be discreet. She walked in like she belonged there, and the doorman greeted her with a nod of recognition. She stayed for 2 hours. When she emerged, I took a photo of her leaving, then packed up my things and went home. That evening, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to confront Lily first, not Marcus, because Marcus was a skilled liar, practiced at making me doubt myself. But Lily? Lily, I'd known her entire life. I knew her tells, her weaknesses, her pressure points, and I was betting that she'd crack first. Part 8. The Confrontation. I invited Lily to lunch the following day, suggesting a quiet cafe far from anywhere we usually went. She agreed immediately, probably thinking I wanted to talk about Marcus's supposed affair some more. She arrived wearing yet another expensive outfit, designer sunglasses perched on her head, radiating confidence. She hugged me like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been sleeping with my husband. We ordered salads and made small talk about work and weather. I waited until our food arrived before I struck. I know, I said simply, putting down my fork. Lily looked up, confused. Know what? About you and Marcus. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Her fork clattered against her plate. Emma, don't. I kept my voice low, controlled. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. I've seen the bank records. I've followed you to the apartment. I know everything. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. It's not what you think. Really? Because I think my husband is having an affair with my sister and has given her hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past year. Am I wrong? Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. You don't understand. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me. She looked around the cafe nervously, as if checking for witnesses. Then she leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. He's blackmailing me. Of all the things I'd expected her to say, that wasn't one of them. What? Marcus is blackmailing me. The tears spilled over now, running down her carefully made-up face. That's where the money's going. He's been blackmailing me for over a year. I sat back, my mind reeling. That doesn't make sense. If he's blackmailing you, why do you look so comfortable together? Why the apartment? Why? Because he's smart, she said bitterly. The affair is part of the blackmail. He makes me be with him, and if I don't, he'll tell everyone what I did. What you did? My voice came out sharper than I intended. What could you possibly have done that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and sleeping with your sister's husband? Lily's hands shook as she reached for her water glass. She took a long drink, then set it down carefully. When she spoke again, her voice was hollow. Do you remember when I lost my job 2 years ago? At the marketing firm? I nodded slowly. She'd been devastated at the time, claiming it was downsizing. I didn't get downsized. I got fired. For embezzlement. The word hung between us like a bomb. I had a gambling problem, she continued, the words tumbling out now. I was betting on sports, online poker, anything. I got in deep with some bad people, owed them more than I could pay. So I started taking money from client accounts. Just a little at first, then more. By the time they caught me, I'd stolen nearly $500,000. I couldn't breathe. My sister, my little sister, had embezzled $500,000. The firm agreed not to prosecute if I paid back every penny and resigned quietly. I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. And then one night, I was at your house for dinner, and I had too much wine, and I told Marcus everything. I begged him not to tell you. I was so ashamed. And he offered to help, I said flatly, beginning to understand. He said he'd lend me the money. Said we could work out a payment plan, keep it between us so you wouldn't have to know what I'd done. I was so relieved, Emma. I thought he was being kind, but he wasn't. No. She laughed, a broken sound. He wasn't. He paid back the firm, all right. But then he said I owed him. Not just the money, but interest. His kind of interest. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd tell you everything. Tell Mom and Dad. Tell the police. He said he had all the evidence and I'd go to jail. I thought I might be sick. How long? 14 months. He's been... She couldn't finish the sentence. We sat in silence for a long moment. Around us, the cafe buzzed with normal life. People laughing, eating, having ordinary conversations. It felt obscene somehow. Why didn't you tell me? I finally asked. Because I was ashamed. Because I thought you'd hate me. Because he convinced me it was my fault. My mistake. And I deserved whatever happened to me because of it. She wiped at her tears angrily. And because part of me hoped he'd get bored. That he'd leave me alone. That I could pay him back and it would all be over. But it wouldn't be over, I said. Men like Marcus don't stop. They just ask for more. Lily nodded miserably. I sat with this information, trying to process it. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator, a manipulator, someone who'd taken my sister's worst mistake and turned it into leverage for rape. Because that's what it was. Coerced sex under threat was rape. The anger that had been simmering inside me for weeks suddenly crystallized into something cold and clear. Does he have copies of the embezzlement evidence? I asked. He says he does, in a safety deposit box. He showed me some of it once to prove he wasn't bluffing. Where? I don't know. He never said. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of his bank statements. Is this the account he pays you from? She looked at the screen and nodded. That's it. Good. I put my phone away and looked at my sister. Really looked at her. She'd always seemed so confident, so together. But now I saw the cracks, the exhaustion, the fear that had been eating her alive. We're going to fix this, I said. Emma, you can't. He'll what? Tell everyone you embezzled money? Fine. Let him. We'll own it. You'll face the consequences like an adult. But we're going to destroy him in the process. How? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. The same way he destroyed you. With money. Part 9. The Trap. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone calculating and cold, willing to play the long game. First, I visited the lawyer I'd found. A sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen who'd seen every kind of divorce case imaginable. I showed her everything. The bank statements, the photos, my documentation of the affair and the payments. Then I told her about the blackmail. That changes everything, Patricia said, leaning back in her chair. If we can prove coercion, not only does your sister have a defense against any civil liability, but your husband could face criminal charges, extortion, sexual assault, maybe more. What do we need? I asked. Evidence of the coercion, proof that the sexual relationship wasn't consensual, documentation of his threats, ideally, a recording. He's too smart to say anything incriminating in a text or email. Then we need to make him say it out loud. That's when we came up with the plan. It was risky. It required Lily's cooperation, which was far from guaranteed given how terrified she was of Marcus. But when I laid it out for her, she surprised me. I'll do it, she said. I'm tired of being afraid. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Lily would tell Marcus she wanted out, that she couldn't do this anymore, that she'd rather face the consequences of her embezzlement than continue the affair. And she'd record the entire conversation. We practiced for hours. Patricia helped us understand what we needed Marcus to say explicitly. Acknowledgement of the blackmail, clear statements linking the money to the sex, any threats about revealing the embezzlement. He has to say it clearly, Patricia emphasized. No implying, no hinting. We need him to hang himself with his own words. The hardest part was that I had to stay completely normal around Marcus during all of this. I had to smile and cook dinner and share a bed with a man I now saw clearly for the monster he was. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled, but I forced myself to be still, to be pleasant, to give him no reason to suspect. Meanwhile, Lily was setting the stage. She started pulling back slightly in her responses to his texts, being less available, creating just enough distance to make him nervous without triggering his anger. The key, Patricia had said, is to make him feel like he's losing control. That's when people make mistakes. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon at the apartment, the same time and place where they always met, so nothing would seem unusual. I helped Lily set up the recording equipment, a small device disguised as a pen, and her phone as backup, both running recording apps that would upload to the cloud in real time. You don't have to do this, I told her the morning of. We can find another way. There is no other way, she said. And Emma, I'm sorry for all of it, for being weak, for not telling you sooner, we'll deal with all that later. I cut her off. Right now, just focus on staying safe. If he gets violent, you leave immediately. Understood? She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. That afternoon, while Marcus thought I was at a book club meeting, I sat in Patricia's office and listened to the live feed from Lily's recording device. Part 10. The recording. The feed crackled to life at 3:17 p.m. You wanted to talk? Marcus's voice, familiar and casual, sent ice through my veins. Yeah. Lily sounded steadier than I'd expected. We need to discuss this arrangement. Arrangement? He sounded amused. That's a very businesslike way to describe our relationship. That's what it is, though, isn't it? A business arrangement. Silence. I could picture him studying her, trying to figure out where this was going. What's this about, Lily? I can't do this anymore. Can't do what? This. Us. Any of it. I want out. The silence that followed was longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had lost its casual warmth. Want out. Yes, I'll get you the money some other way. I'll take out loans, work extra jobs, whatever it takes. But I can't keep sleeping with you. It's wrong. Emma's my sister, and Emma. He laughed, but it was a harsh sound. You're suddenly worried about Emma? Where was this concern a year ago? That was different. You said you'd help me, and then I did help you. I paid back $500,000 of stolen money. I kept you out of prison. I gave you a nice apartment, an allowance, took care of you. And in exchange, You gave me something Emma stopped giving me a long time ago. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. You blackmailed me, Lily said. You said if I didn't sleep with you, you'd turn me in. Blackmail is such an ugly word. What would you call it? A mutually beneficial arrangement. You needed something. I needed something. We found a solution that worked for both of us. It stopped working for me. That's unfortunate. His voice turned cold. Because it's still working fine for me. And I still have all the evidence of your little embezzlement scheme. Bank records, emails, forged documents with your signature. Everything a prosecutor would need to send you away for 5 to 10 years. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. You'll tell them you stole $500,000 from your employer? Go ahead. See how that works out for you. Oh, and I'll make sure Emma knows exactly what kind of person her baby sister really is. A thief. A liar. Someone who was so desperate to cover up her crimes that she slept with her own sister's husband. You're the one who coerced me. Did I? He sounded amused again. Where's your proof? You came to me for help. You accepted my money. You slept with me willingly for over a year. That's what everyone will see. The evidence will show a consensual affair between two adults, and the only person who looks bad in that scenario is you. You bastard! Careful, Lily. You're not in a position to name call. There was the sound of movement. Footsteps. Where are you going? Lily's voice, panicked. I think we're done here. Come Thursday at the usual time or I make some phone calls. Your choice. Marcus, wait. Oh, and Lily? Don't try anything stupid. No confessing to Emma. No going to the police. Because if you do, I'll make sure you lose everything. Your freedom. Your family. Everything. Understand? Silence. I said, do you understand? Yes. The word was barely audible. Good girl. I'll see you next week. The door opened and closed. Then there was just silence and the sound of Lily crying. I sat in Patricia's office, trembling with rage so intense it felt like it might consume me. That's enough, Patricia said quietly. We have everything we need. Here's part 11. Assembling the evidence. The next week was a blur of activity. Patricia's legal team worked around the clock, building a case that would not just end my marriage, but ensure Marcus faced real consequences. The recording was damning, but we needed more. We needed to trace every dollar, document every threat, build an airtight case that left no room for reasonable doubt. I gave Patricia access to all our joint accounts and records. She hired a forensic accountant, a meticulous woman named Sarah Chen who'd spent 20 years tracking financial crimes. Sarah approached our case like an archaeologist excavating a dig site, carefully brushing away layers of deception to reveal the truth beneath. What she uncovered was staggering. Marcus hadn't just been stealing from our joint accounts. He'd been systematically siphoning money from our finances for nearly 5 years, predating even Lily's embezzlement by 3 years. Fake business expenses, inflated client entertainment costs, investment accounts that didn't exist, loans he'd taken out in both our names without my knowledge. Your husband is what we call a financial abuser, Sarah explained, spreading printouts across Patricia's conference table. See these patterns? He's been controlling your access to money, hiding assets, creating financial dependence. The affair and blackmail were just one aspect of a much larger pattern of control. I looked at the evidence laid out before me, thousands of transactions, carefully documented and cross-referenced. Each one represented a choice Marcus had made to deceive me, to steal from me, to ensure I stayed dependent on him. How much? I asked, my voice hollow. How much did he take over the years? Sarah's expression was grim. Including the payments to Lily? Close to $400,000? The number was incomprehensible. $400,000. That was a down payment on a house. College funds for children we'd never had. Retirement savings. My future. Stolen and spent on maintaining Marcus's double life. Meanwhile, we filed a police report for Lily. The detective assigned to the case was a woman in her 50s named Detective Sandra Morrison. She had steel gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much cruelty. She listened to Lily's story without judgment, taking notes in a precise, neat handwriting. Then she listened to the recording with an expression of barely controlled anger. This is textbook coercion, she said when it finished playing. Sexual assault under threat, extortion, possibly RICO charges if we can prove this was an ongoing criminal enterprise. She looked at Lily with something like respect. You did good, recording this. A lot of victims never get this kind of evidence. I had help, Lily said quietly, glancing at me. Still, you were brave. Detective Morrison turned to me. And based on what you're telling me about the financial abuse, I think this might not be his first time. Men who do this, who systematically exploit vulnerable people, they rarely stop at one victim. That thought made me ill. How many other women had Marcus done this to? How many other people had he identified as vulnerable, offered help, and then trapped in his web of manipulation and control? I'll start pulling his financial records, Detective Morrison said. See if there are other suspicious patterns, other victims. This is going to take time, but I promise you, we're going to build an airtight case. But there was still one problem. Marcus had to believe everything was normal until we were ready to strike. And that meant I had to continue playing the oblivious wife. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every morning, I woke up beside a man I now knew was a predator. I made him coffee, asked about his day, packed his lunch. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye. I texted him during the day with mundane questions about dinner plans. At night, I lay beside him in bed and pretended to sleep while my mind raced with everything I knew. Sometimes I'd watch him in the darkness, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and wonder if I'd ever really known him at all. Had any of it been real? Our courtship? Our wedding? The early years when I'd thought we were happy? Or had it all been an elaborate performance? Marcus playing the role of devoted husband while calculating how best to use me. He had no idea. That was the thing that struck me most. How easily he compartmentalized his life. He could blackmail my sister during the day, betray our marriage vows, steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from our accounts, and then come home and watch TV with me like nothing was wrong. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with something like affection, and I wondered if he'd ever actually loved me, or if our entire relationship had been a lie from the start. How are you holding up? Patricia asked me during one of our meetings. This can't be easy, maintaining the facade. I'm fine, I lied. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. You don't have to be fine, Emma. What you're going through, living with someone you now know is dangerous, pretending everything's normal, it's traumatic. I can recommend a therapist who specializes in— I'll be fine, I interrupted. I just need to get through this. Once he's arrested, once it's over, I'll deal with my feelings. But right now, I need to stay focused. She nodded slowly. Just remember, you're not alone in this. You have a whole team supporting you. 10 days after Lily's recorded conversation, Patricia called me with an update. We're ready, she said. Everything's in place. The police are prepared to arrest him on extortion and sexual assault charges. I've drafted the divorce papers and filed for a restraining order. I've also filed motions to freeze all your joint accounts and prevent him from accessing any assets. The question is, when do you want to do this? I thought about it. I could do it privately, have him arrested at work or at home. Or I could do it publicly, in front of people we knew, making sure everyone understood exactly what he'd done. Sunday, I said. We're hosting dinner again. My family will be there. I want them to hear the truth. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's bold. I'm done being quiet. Part 12. Sunday dinner, Redux. Planning that dinner was surreal. I sent out invitations like it was a normal family gathering. My parents. Lily, of course. Marcus's parents, too. They deserved to know what their son had become. A few close friends, including Rachel. Marcus was surprised I wanted to host again so soon, but seemed pleased. See, he said. I told you family dinners were good for us. I smiled and didn't answer. The menu was the same as last time. Pot roast, rosemary potatoes, green beans, apple pie. I cooked with methodical precision, every step measured and controlled. Patricia was on standby with the police. They'd come when I called, not before. I wanted everyone to hear the truth first. Guests started arriving at 6. My parents first, then Marcus's parents, then Rachel and a few other friends. Lily came last, pale but composed. We gathered around the dining room table, the same configuration as before, except this time I'd placed folders at my seat, copies of everything, the bank records, the recordings, the police report. This is nice, Marcus's mother said, accepting a glass of wine. You two are so good about bringing everyone together. Marcus smiled and squeezed my shoulder. Emma's a wonderful hostess. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled back. We made it through appetizers and salad, through the main course and polite conversation. Everyone was relaxed, comfortable, having a good time. Then, as I served dessert, I remained standing. Actually, I said, before we eat, I have something I need to share with everyone. The table went quiet. Marcus looked up at me, slightly puzzled. Emma? I've discovered some things recently. Important things. And I think everyone here deserves to know the truth. I picked up one of the folders. For the past year, my husband has been having an affair with my sister. The silence was deafening. Marcus's face went white, then red. Emma, what are you— Let me finish. My voice was steady, calmer than I'd expected. The affair started when Lily came to him for help. She'd made a terrible mistake, embezzled money from her employer, and was desperate. Marcus offered to help her, paid back the money she'd stolen, but then he told her she owed him, not just the money, but her body. He's been blackmailing her for over a year, forcing her to sleep with him under threat of exposing her crime. Lily had tears streaming down her face. My mother looked like she might faint. Marcus's father was standing now, his face purple with rage. That's not— Marcus started. I opened the folder and pulled out the bank statements. These show the payments from our joint account to a secret account, which was then used to pay for an apartment where they met. Hundreds of thousands of our dollars, Marcus. This is insane, Marcus said, looking around the table desperately. She's having some kind of breakdown. Emma, please. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker on the sideboard. This is a recording from last week, between Marcus and Lily, at the apartment he's been paying for. I pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room. You came to me for help. You accepted my money. You slept with me willingly for over a year. Then Lily, you blackmailed me. You said if I didn't sleep with you, you'd turn me in. Marcus, a mutually beneficial arrangement. You needed something. I needed something. I let it play all the way through. Every ugly word, every threat, every manipulation. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Marcus, his mother whispered, tell me that's not your voice. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, and the expression on his face was pure hatred. You bitch, he said quietly. You recorded me? Actually, Lily recorded you, with my help, and the help of my lawyer, and the police. The police? He stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. They're waiting outside. I'm filing for divorce, Marcus. Lily's pressing charges for sexual assault and extortion, and I'm making sure everyone knows exactly what you've done. He looked around the table at the shocked faces of his parents, his friends, my family. Then he looked back at me. You can't do this. Watch me. That's when he lunged. He didn't get far. My father and Marcus's father both moved to intercept him, but it was Rachel who got there first, stepping between us with her hands up. Don't, she said firmly. Don't make this worse. Marcus stopped, breathing hard, his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he might hit her anyway, but then the doorbell rang. That'll be the police, I said calmly. I walked past everyone and opened the door. 2 officers stood there, along with Detective Morrison, the woman assigned to Lily's case. Mrs. Emma Taylor? Detective Morrison said formally. We have a warrant for Marcus Taylor's arrest. Part 13. The Aftermath. Marcus was arrested at our dining room table, in front of everyone. They read him his rights while his mother sobbed and his father stood rigid with shock. He didn't say anything as they led him away, just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Rage, betrayal, hatred, all of it mixed together. After he was gone, the house erupted into chaos. My mother was crying, trying to comfort Lily while simultaneously trying to understand what had happened. Marcus's parents were in shock, his mother insisting there must be some mistake, his father silent and grim. Rachel pulled me aside. Jesus Christ, Emma. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Before today? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. No, she admitted. I would have thought you were paranoid. God, I'm so sorry. The dinner party dissolved. People left in stunned silence, not knowing what to say. Eventually, it was just me, Lily, and my parents. My father made tea, a mundane action that somehow felt appropriate for the situation. We sat in the living room, the remains of the ruined dinner still on the table in the other room. "I need to know everything," my mother finally said, looking at Lily. "From the beginning." So Lily told them everything. The gambling, the embezzlement, the desperation that led her to confide in Marcus, the blackmail that followed, the year of living in fear and shame. My parents listened without interrupting. When Lily finished, my mother reached over and took her hand. "You should have told us," she said softly. "We could have helped. I was so ashamed. You made a mistake, a big one, but that doesn't mean you deserved what he did to you." My mother looked at me. "Neither of you deserved this." We sat in silence for a while, processing everything that had happened. "What happens now?" my father asked. "Now Marcus faces trial," I said. "The prosecutor thinks they have a strong case for extortion and sexual assault. The recording helps a lot. And the divorce? Patricia says it'll be quick, given the circumstances. Marcus doesn't have much ground to stand on. And the money he took? We'll get most of it back. The forensic accountant found evidence that he'd been siphoning money from our accounts for years, not just for Lily. Hidden accounts, fake investments. I'll be fine financially." My father nodded slowly. "And you, Lily? What about the embezzlement?" Lily took a shaky breath. "I'm going to face it. Whatever consequences there are, I'll accept them. I'm done running and hiding. We'll get you a good lawyer," my mother said firmly. "If Marcus's coercion can be proven, it might help your case. And regardless, you're our daughter. We'll support you through this." Lily started crying again, but this time they were different tears. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion from carrying the secret for so long. That night, after everyone had gone home, I stood in my kitchen and looked at the disaster of the dinner party. Plates of uneaten food, wine glasses with lipstick stains, the speaker that had broadcast Marcus's own words condemning him. I started cleaning, methodically washing dishes and putting away leftovers. It was almost midnight by the time I finished. The house was silent, empty. For the first time in years, I was completely alone, and I realized I wasn't afraid. Part 14. The Trial. The trial took 8 months to get to court, and it was brutal. Marcus hired an expensive defense attorney who tried to paint Lily as a willing participant in the affair. They argued that the recording was taken out of context, that their relationship had been consensual, that Lily had only cried coercion after I'd found out about the affair. But Patricia and the prosecution were ready. They had the bank records showing the systematic payments. They had testimony from the apartment building staff who'd noticed Lily often arrived looking upset and left looking worse. They had evidence of Marcus's threatening texts when Lily tried to miss one of their scheduled meetings. And they had the recording, played in full for the jury. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row where Marcus could see me. Lily sat beside me, along with my parents. His parents stopped coming after the first week, unable to face what their son had done. The testimony was hard to listen to. Lily had to describe, in explicit detail, what Marcus had done to her. The threats he'd made, the fear she'd lived with. The defense tried to tear her apart on cross-examination, but she held steady. When they asked why she'd waited so long to come forward, she looked directly at the jury and said, "Because he made me believe I deserved it, that it was my fault, that no one would believe me over him." The prosecutor later told me several jurors were visibly moved by that statement. Marcus took the stand in his own defense, which his lawyer advised against, but he insisted on. He was calm, collected, well-spoken. He admitted to the affair, but claimed it had been mutual. He said the payments were gifts, not blackmail. "I cared about Lily," he told the jury. "I was helping her get back on her feet. Yes, we became intimate, but that was because we had real feelings for each other. This whole blackmail narrative is something my wife invented when she found out about the affair." He was good, convincing. For a moment, I worried the jury might believe him, but then the prosecution played the recording again. And this time, they highlighted specific phrases. "You gave me something Emma stopped giving me. I still have all the evidence of your little embezzlement scheme. Come Thursday at the usual time, or I make some phone calls. Your choice. If you try anything stupid, I'll make sure you lose everything." Those words, in Marcus's own voice, destroyed his defense. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, They found him guilty on all counts: extortion, coercion, and 3 counts of sexual assault. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison. As they led him away, Marcus looked at me one last time. I don't know what he expected to see: tears, regret, forgiveness. But I met his gaze steadily and felt nothing but relief. Part 15. Rebuilding. The divorce was finalized 3 months after the trial. I got everything: the house, the remaining money, the car, the furniture, even Marcus's collection of expensive watches he'd been so proud of. Marcus's attorney tried to argue for a more equitable division of assets, claiming that Marcus needed resources to rebuild his life post-incarceration. Patricia shut that down immediately. "Your client stole over $400,000 from my client over 5 years," she said coldly in the courtroom. "He systematically abused her financially, emotionally, and betrayed her in the worst possible way. My client is entitled to every penny." The judge wasn't sympathetic to Marcus's position either. Given his criminal conviction and the overwhelming evidence of financial abuse, she ruled entirely in my favor. Walking out of that courtroom, divorce decree in hand, I felt empty. I'd expected to feel victorious, relieved, something, but mostly I just felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out my insides and left only a shell. Lily faced her own legal consequences. The embezzlement case was reopened, and she was charged formally. But the prosecutor, Detective Morrison, and the judge all took into account the coercion she'd faced from Marcus. The fact that she'd been exploited while vulnerable, that she'd been punished repeatedly for a mistake she'd already paid back, it all worked in her favor. She ended up with 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling for her gambling addiction. She also had to attend regular meetings with a financial advisor to ensure she was managing her money responsibly. It was fair, I thought. She'd made terrible choices with the embezzlement, but she'd also been victimized. The justice system recognized both truths. She moved back in with our parents, unable to afford her own place after paying back what she could of the embezzled money and covering her legal fees. It was awkward at first. Our childhood bedrooms still decorated as they'd been when we were teenagers, now housing 2 adult women trying to piece their lives back together. But slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild our relationship. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said one afternoon when she came over to help me pack up Marcus's remaining belongings to donate. We'd been working in silence for an hour, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. "I know I hurt you, that I betrayed you in the worst possible way." I taped up another box full of Marcus's business books. Books on negotiation, influence, strategic thinking, titles that now seemed ominous rather than inspirational. "You were a victim too," I said finally. "Yes, you made terrible choices initially. The gambling, the embezzlement, those were your mistakes and you have to own them. But what Marcus did to you? That wasn't your fault. You didn't deserve to be blackmailed and raped for a year." She flinched at the word rape. We'd all been dancing around it, using euphemisms like coercion and assault. But that's what it was. Marcus had raped my sister repeatedly, using her shame and fear as weapons. "I should have told you sooner," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Maybe, but I understand why you didn't." I sat back on my heels, looking at her, really looking at her for the first time in months. She'd lost weight. There were circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. The glossy confidence she'd always projected was gone, replaced by something more genuine but more fragile. I'm not going to pretend this doesn't hurt, that our relationship isn't damaged, maybe permanently, but we're family. And I hope, we can figure out how to move forward from this. She nodded, unable to speak through her tears. We worked in silence for a while longer, boxing up the remnants of Marcus's presence in my life, his clothes, his electronics, his personal items. With each box, I felt lighter. The house felt too big without Marcus, too full of memories. I'd walk into the kitchen and remember him standing at the stove making his famous Sunday pancakes. I'd pass the couch and see the ghost of us curled up watching movies. Even the good memories were tainted now, poisoned by the knowledge that he'd been deceiving me the entire time. After 6 months of rattling around in that too-large house, I decided to sell it. The real estate market was good, and I made a substantial profit. I bought a smaller condo downtown, close to the city center. 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Modern, minimal, clean lines and neutral colors. No history, no ghosts. My first night there, I ordered takeout and sat on the floor eating Chinese food straight from the containers, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in over a year, I felt something like peace. I also went back to work. My old boss at the accounting firm, a gruff man named Tom who'd mentored me early in my career, was thrilled when I called asking if there were any positions available. "Best auditor I ever had," he said warmly. "When can you start?" Being back in the office felt strange at first. My skills were rusty, my confidence shaken. But slowly, day by day, I remembered who I'd been before Marcus. The woman who could spot a discrepancy in accounts from across the room. Who could untangle the most complex financial records? Who was valued for her brain, not her ability to host dinner parties and smile pleasantly? My coworkers were kind. They knew vaguely what I'd been through. The divorce and trial had been covered in the local news, but they didn't pry. They just welcomed me back, included me in lunch runs and after-work drinks, treated me normally. That normalcy was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Rachel and I grew closer during this time. She'd felt terrible about not believing me initially, about dismissing my concerns when I'd first tried to tell her something was wrong. "I should have listened," she said over coffee one Saturday morning. "I should have taken you seriously instead of telling you you were being paranoid." "You didn't know," I told her. "No one did. Marcus was very good at his performance. He had everyone fooled. Still, you're my best friend. I should have at least considered that you might be right." I appreciated her apology, her obvious guilt. But more than that, I appreciated that she was there now, showing up for coffee dates, calling to check in, being present in a way she hadn't been when I'd needed her most. We were rebuilding too, our friendship deepening through honesty about her failure and my forgiveness. About a year after Marcus's sentencing, I was cleaning out the last of the storage boxes from the old house when I found something interesting. An old journal of Marcus's from college. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. The entries were sporadic, mostly about classes and fraternity events. But then, about halfway through, I found an entry that made my blood run cold. "Figured out something useful today? If you help someone when they're desperate, they owe you. And people will do almost anything to protect themselves from consequences. Jake borrowed money for his gambling debts. And now I've got him exactly where I want him. He thinks we're friends. Idiot doesn't realize I own him now." There were more entries like that. Different names, different situations, but the same pattern. Marcus had been doing this for years, finding vulnerable people, offering help, then leveraging their desperation for his own gain. I took the journal to Detective Morrison. "I thought you should see this," I said. "There might be other victims." She read through it carefully, her expression growing darker with each page. "We'll follow up on these names," she said. "See if anyone wants to come forward now that he's been convicted." 3 more people eventually did. 2 men and a woman, all with similar stories of Marcus offering help and then demanding things in return. None of the situations were as extreme as what he'd done to Lily, but the pattern was clear. The prosecutor added charges, and Marcus's sentence was extended. Part 16. 2 years later. I'm sitting in a cafe, not the same one where I confronted Lily, but a new favorite spot near my condo, when my phone rings. It's a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. "Emma?" It's David, Marcus's brother. I'm surprised. David and I had never been particularly close, and after Marcus's conviction, his whole family had essentially cut off contact with me. "Hi, David," I say cautiously. "How are you?" "I'm okay. Listen, I know this is probably weird, me calling, but I wanted to reach out because I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything." "I do." "When everything came out about Marcus, I didn't believe it at first. I thought you'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing, that you were exaggerating or lying. I said some things." He pauses. "I said some things I'm not proud of. It's understandable. He's your brother. That doesn't make it right. I've had 2 years to think about it, to really examine who my brother is, and I realized I'd been seeing the same patterns for years and just ignoring them, explaining them away. He's always been manipulative, always had this way of getting people to do what he wanted. I just didn't want to believe he was capable of what he did to you and Lily. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it. And because my parents are finally ready to admit the truth, too. They wanted me to reach out, to let you know they're sorry for how they reacted, for defending him even when the evidence was overwhelming. I don't know what to say. For so long, I'd felt like I was the villain in Marcus's family's eyes, the vindictive ex-wife who'd destroyed their son's life. Thank you, I finally manage. For calling. It means more than you know. One more thing, David says. Marcus is up for parole review next year. They'll probably contact you for a victim impact statement. I'll be ready. After we hang up, I sit with my coffee and think about how much has changed in 2 years. Lily is doing well. She finished her probation, got a job at a small nonprofit where her marketing skills are valued, and hasn't gambled in 18 months. She's dating someone new, a kind, quiet man who knows her whole story and accepts her anyway. My parents are older, more tired, but supportive. The whole situation aged them, but it also brought our family closer together in some ways. Rachel is still my best friend, now understanding in a way she wasn't before that people can hide terrible things behind charming smiles. And me? I'm different too. Stronger, but also more cautious. It's hard to trust people now. I find myself analyzing everyone's words, looking for hidden meanings, searching for manipulation. My therapist says that's normal, that it will fade with time. But she also says I should be proud of how I handled things, that I stayed calm, gathered evidence, and took control of a situation designed to make me powerless. I don't know if I'm proud exactly. Mostly, I just feel tired, and older, and aware that the world is more complicated and cruel than I used to believe, but I also know I survived. Not just survived, I won. Marcus thought he was so smart, that he had everything under control. He laughed when I found those panties because he thought I was too naive, too trusting, too weak to ever figure out the truth. He was wrong. Sometimes I wonder if there was a moment when he realized how badly he'd underestimated me. Maybe during the trial, when his own words were played back condemning him. Maybe when the jury read the guilty verdict. Maybe in his cell, in the quiet hours, when he has nothing to do but think about how his own arrogance brought him down. I hope so. I hope he realizes that treating me like I was stupid was the biggest mistake he ever made. Epilogue. The money. There's one last piece of the story. Remember all that money Marcus took from our accounts? The hundreds of thousands he used to blackmail Lily and fund his double life? Patricia's team tracked down most of it. The forensic accountant was brilliant. He found hidden accounts, tracked transfers, uncovered a whole financial trail Marcus had thought was untraceable. After the trial, after the divorce settlement, after paying legal fees and taxes, I ended up with a substantial sum, more money than I'd ever had at one time in my life. I could have kept it all. No one would have blamed me. I'd earned it, in a way. Earned it through years of being deceived and manipulated. But I made a different choice. I used some of it to set up a trust fund for victims of financial abuse. Working with organizations that help people escape coercive relationships, I created a program that provides emergency funds and legal support for people trying to leave abusive situations. I gave a significant portion to the company Lily had embezzled from, above and beyond what she'd already paid back. They were shocked. They'd never expected to see that money again. And I invested the rest wisely, creating a stable financial foundation for myself. Not the lavish lifestyle Marcus had always aspired to, but something better. Independence, security, the freedom to make choices without fear. Last week, I got a letter from a woman named Sarah. She'd heard about the trust fund through one of the partner organizations. Her husband had been controlling their finances for years, taking her paychecks, running up debt in her name, threatening to ruin her credit if she left. The trust fund gave her enough money to hire a lawyer, get a divorce, and start over. She wrote to thank me. "You probably saved my life," she said in the letter, "or at least gave me back my life. I didn't think anyone would believe me or help me. Thank you for believing people like me." I cried reading that letter, because I understood exactly how she felt. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice with the money. Marcus had tried to use it as a weapon, a tool for control and manipulation. I was turning it into something else, a means of fighting back, of helping others escape the traps he'd perfected. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about making sure their weapons can't hurt anyone else. It's about transforming instruments of harm into tools of healing. The money Marcus laughed about, the money he thought he'd hidden so cleverly, the money that made my sister go pale when it finally surfaced in the light of day. That money is now helping people break free from situations like ours. I think that would infuriate him more than any prison sentence ever could. And honestly, that makes me smile. Afterward, a note from Emma. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, or in Lily's, please know, you're not alone. You're not stupid. You're not weak. Manipulators are skilled at making you doubt yourself, at convincing you that you're the problem, at isolating you from people who might help. That's intentional. That's how they maintain power. But you have more strength than you realize. You have more options than they've let you believe. Document everything. Keep evidence. Tell someone you trust. And if they don't believe you, tell someone else. Keep telling until someone listens. And remember, their behavior is not your fault. What they've done to you is not a reflection of your worth or intelligence. It's a reflection of their character, their choices, their deliberate decision to hurt someone vulnerable. You deserve better. You deserve safety, respect, and the freedom to make your own choices without fear. And when you're ready, when you've gathered your evidence and found your strength and chosen your moment, fight back, not with their weapons. Not with manipulation or cruelty, but with the truth, with courage, with the determination to take back what they tried to steal from you. Because in the end, the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. I found that out when my husband laughed at my questions about those unfamiliar panties. He thought I was foolish, dramatic, easy to dismiss. But while he was laughing, I was paying attention. I was following the money. I was building my case. And when the truth finally came out, when the money appeared, traced and documented and undeniable, it wasn't my husband who panicked. It was never about the panties. It was always about the money. And the money doesn't lie. The end.